Hello and welcome back to PlayIPredict.com. I'm delighted today to have Paul Bellew on the show. Very much welcome, Paul. Paul is the Galway Hurling Committee Chairperson and has done a raft of work throughout various Galway kind of GAA platforms over the years. So he's become very popular and famous this year for the wrong reasons. We'll touch into that first. But firstly, Paul, welcome and thank you so much for joining us here.
Sure, Jonathan. Good to join you.
Perfect. So I'd just like to start the chit chat usually just to try and lower it down a bit. At the start, we always like to talk about people's sport and idols as a kid, or people that had most influence on them as a kid. And I always give the example. You've probably heard me ramble on. It was my mother dragging me out in the garden. I'm from the opposite end, big ball side of the county, so I had me out playing football and whatnot. But who on yourself, from your own point of view, who had been the biggest influences on, I suppose, your sporting growth?
Yeah, I think from the outset, I was always mad into sport, but I was hurling around Castle Blakeney and Ballymaccord and Pádraig Pearse's territory. Growing up, it was going to club matches, and I think a lot of people of my age, and anyone particularly a bit older, Joe Cooney was always the name. Sarsfields were up the road, and they won a couple of Club All-Irelands around 93, 94. I would have been 8 or 9 at the time, and the claim to fame, I suppose, for us at the time was they used our pitch because it was dry during the winter months to train. But look, a sporting nerd in every capacity. I was actually just, with all the nostalgia with Jack Charlton lately, I just, USA 94, vague memories of Italia 90. So I loved it all, still do. Follow practically the most. Hurling remains the number one.
Absolutely. And so, like, you've come to prominence, I suppose, from your, admin organization side in the county board, but yourself as well, you'd have played a good bit as well growing up, I'm sure.
I played with Pearses up along. I would have just schooled in St. Coons as well. We would have had pretty good teams there as well, interface with between Hasker Fohana and ourselves. They have the bragging rights at the moment, so I'm glad I'm not back in St. Coons at the moment. But yeah, I would have played hurling with Pearses up along. Myself and Sir Donlan would have been the one age group, so we would have been the same all the way up. But that would have UL then went to UL, and then the career dived a little bit, we'll say.
Are you saying there was distractions or something, Paul?
I would say there were slight distractions, and became more of a junior hurler than, I suppose, intermediate then at the time, and then we progressed on to senior. And then you, like yourself, you go away for a few years, based out of Limerick, and then you came back as club secretary, really. I think that was the only place I could make a meaningful contribution.
Very good. And like, just that transition, like, it always, I'm a little bit, I suppose, I think GAA kind of structures and management structures and stuff like that off the field, they can become very confusing at times when you're not involved in the circle. Even simple things. I remember what he always used to confuse me as a kid was if a player got sent off, he had like 3 or 4 different bodies that he could appeal to, and you're like, where are all these structures coming out from? And I don't think there's been a huge improvement lately, but I remember not that long ago, you wouldn't have a Scooby and like you'd all these acronyms and stuff like that, and you just wouldn't know where you're going. But how did you kind of, I suppose, you came back to club secretary, how did you make that next transition into the admin side? Did it just kind of roll from there and you almost got stuck with it?
Yeah, I think, the club secretary role is good fun. You're close to the team, to the matches. Obviously, you're doing the admin work, etc. And then I suppose you became a delegate to the county committee, or the county board, as we call it. More commonly, it'd be known as. And I just went in there, I suppose, and I'd be pretty, say it as I see it, I guess, and maintain that, and that kind of propelled me into it. And look, I think nobody wants to be shouting out that they're a GA administrator involved, and I get a lot of stick at that. This is my first year as chairperson of the Hurling Committee. I am, like to be, pretty fresh to it, and I think one of the things I'd love to do and trying to do is, there's a massive we and us type of, or us and them type of thing even within the GAA, between clubs. Even in my own club at the moment now, it's like I'm referred to as ye, and I'm really keen to narrow that type of gap. And the way to do that is to be, as I said, straight up about things, explain things, justify things. And that's something I'd be keen to do, and make sure everything is transparent, open. And as I said, when we chat meetings, everything should be solution based. Shouldn't be a forum for lads fighting out their there are differences as it is sometimes. So that's kind of what motivates me, to do it right, do it as well as I can, and to integrate things a bit better. Galway GAA has had a rough 2 or 3 years, and I was very much part of, no other way of saying it, Jonathan. I was very critical and isolating at times. I said some things a couple of years ago. That was my experience. In fairness, I did feel it led to a lot of change for the better, and I think things are improving, but we still have a significant amount of work to do, especially from a public image and promotional point of view, but things are changing.
Yeah, look, the elephant in the room is that situation, and we're not going to get into it here. That's not the reason I put you on. Look, that's, suppose, we'd all hope that's a line drawn in the sand, and we can move,
absolutely.
we can move on together, because there's been enough bad coverage and press, and look, we won't get into the ins and outs of it here. But I did find from the outside looking in, as someone who sometimes, you'd see, well, it's not resentment, but you'd be like, oh, for God's sake, what are they on about here? And that sort of thing. The statement that you gave in 2018, I think you referred to yourself a couple of the next year later, was you tore the head off some executive. That's really where, I suppose, prominence is the wrong word, but that's where I think a lot of people kind of saw you and, okay, wow, okay, this is a guy that's trying to be up straight and honest. Not, and this is no direction of other people, but trying to make a new kind of new beginnings and stuff like that. That really was your, I suppose, catapult into the next step of this chapter 2, if we want to call it, to try and kind of, I suppose, make the move on in all the right directions.
Exactly. And I often get asked by that now and again, do I regret it? And it felt it had to be said at the time. And again, very much so, a lot of that frustration at the time was that there was a lot of people there not doing enough to help themselves, that weren't standing up for themselves actually. And that when I looked in a bit more, they were doing some of the right things, but weren't promoting it, if you know what I mean. I've fully said this, I've said this year, you're going to probably see, if I have anything to do with it, and I think you're probably seeing it from a hurling committee perspective on the ground, you're going to see a lot more aggressive Galway GAA. That's not maybe the right word, but one that will, if somebody comes out and says something now that isn't fully true, or tries to whatever, they will get a response. And as I said, that's something I would like to bring in that, and the one thing I suppose I will say, them comments that I still get messages about, and there's still phrases the lads will send into the joking about, is it's very easy to throw them words around, and I'm probably getting them myself from elsewhere. But one thing I would always do and did is back it up, and that I got involved on the basis of what I said. I just didn't sit there and throw mud and then walk away, because look, I see that going on every day of the week. You can see it on social media, yourself, but so I said I had to go and put myself forward and actually do something proactive and do something positive and contribute and get involved. And I know it's a cliche, it really is. There are tons of so many good people in there, and they are doing the right things and trying to do it. It's mainly about showing that and highlighting that and explaining it to people. We'll probably touch on a couple of examples here where people go, what are they doing? A crazy decision. But there's 100 things happening in the background, Jonathan, the reason that these decisions come to. We just have to be better at explaining them would be
that's the thing, because look, it wasn't helped by the situation, but even that aside, you look at other sporting organizations, FEI, whatever sport, if it's politics or whatever, it's very much to tar people with the one group and go, oh, sure, they're all at X, Y, and Z or whatever. But to be able to answer it back, or to give, I suppose, constructive criticism as you did, and then like I want to say as well, like the year later, that you did acknowledge the credit that the work has been done. And I think from basket case to model case or something along those lines, and power finance and a lot, you did, I suppose, you talked the talk, but you walked the walk after that then as well, in terms of your actions.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. And I think it did affect change. That's why I would probably stand over it. Anywhere near the level that you would love to get to, not yet, but it is absolutely not an overnight process. And there has been a significant change in the office. Mark Gotch is in place as operations and finance manager. He's doing a very good job, I suppose, modernizing a lot of the things that need to be done from a professional side of it, because you have a games administration side, and then you have obviously your professional side of not the admin stuff, but the actual, running an organization with a turnover of 5 million, to be quite honest, so there has been those positive impacts. We've a lot more to do though. I think it's a lot better, but again, it's only the start of a journey, I would say.
And just one thing then as well, like that's such a big operation, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. County boards are big businesses now. There's huge volumes of money. There's so much going on. There's so much planning needed, particularly on something like Galway, where it's a tier one football and hurling county as well. It's an absolutely abundance about of work. How do you manage that with your own day job and your own family as well? That must be, and then you're only getting nothing but abuse, I suppose, at times for us as well.
Yeah, like you also created much work for yourself, as I said to the lads that I've been working with on the hurling committee, and that you can walk yourself into a lot of this as well in terms of you can manage it. But yeah, the evenings are taken up. I suppose we moved to a lot of online meetings for during COVID. You know, especially during the day, you have to just block out a lot of it, and you know, you do a bit in the morning or whatever. You chat to the lads at lunchtime. It's a good question. It feels probably a bit natural, you know, in that I obviously enjoy it to a certain extent. True. There's no point saying any different. And again, I think we've had a good year. Again, we've had a good championship. I think people have been very happy within Galway hurling circles, you know, of the competition that's been put in place. So they've been very supportive. So the abuse has been low flying. And you know, it's funny what you say. You have to be a thick skin to some of this. And then other side, I'd be very conscious. I take a lot of it on board and say, you know, if there's truth or there's a question, you know, I've seen myself pick a couple of the lads up on the podcast that cover the Galway hurling. You know, you probably know Patrick Early and David Connors.
Indeed, yeah,
you know, they have their one. It's brilliant. But you know, there's a couple of comments made or whatever, and so straight on the phone, I was like, lads. Don't say something is crazy again unless you understand the reason, whatever, and explain whatever. And they were like, actually, that's just typical us, and you know, throwing that cliche really. So the abuse hasn't been that bad, but no, it's that like Jen is very tolerant. You know, she comes from a hurling household in Piercing, Limerick. You know, her brother's involved with the Limerick senior squad, so I've probably had an easy pass there more than I should have. She knows what it's like, you know. So
very good. Because look, you touched on 2020 being a good year. By hell, it's been a busy year. Like it seems like a lifetime ago. Again, a subject I'm not going to go into, but a management change and then a new manager to be fought and a little bit of stuff going on behind the scenes as well. It wasn't plain sailing, put it that way. That's a busy thing to be lumped on at the start of the year, isn't it, as well? Particularly the way it kind of dragged a little.
Yeah, look, it did, and whatever happened
exactly.
last year. I came in at the latter half of the end of last year, just the way it happened. I actually got nominated from the floor to be part of the team to look myself, John Fahey, Noel Lane, and Michael Larkin, who was the previous chairman. And so for me, it was the start, and there was no point really looking back. And you know, we'll look back on it again. We went through a very rigorous process. It was very much in the glare, I think, of the media, you know, full of speculation. So it wasn't easy done, but it was something I'm very happy with in terms of how it was done. Again, people don't no interest in that, but it was forensic. You know, we would have identified something in the region of over 40 something names initially. Now, obviously that's not 40 something candidates, but that was the level we went to. We looked at the profile we were looking for. We spoke to the players, of reps, of no hesitation in saying that's been straight up. Was it the players picked the manager, etc.? No, it was input from every side, and as it should have been. And we built what was the profile that was needed, and we broke it down into categories, and we did an interview process, and I couldn't be happier with that process. It'd be something I would use again. And you know, I think we have a serious manager in place now. Probably obviously hasn't, given the year that we've had, probably wouldn't have had the highest profile within Galway, etc. But you're looking for the right fit for the right bunch of players, and it's a very impressive process. And I think, you know, the pity was when it all stopped, as you'd know, they started late, but you probably saw the momentum that was coming. Absolutely, with the Cork, the Tipperary games, the style of play. You know, feedback is very good. Everyone is very happy at the moment throughout the year, and you know, I'm confident of what it's going to be different. It's not the same as it's going to be. We'll look back in January and maybe say, what did the winter hurling suit? What did it change? But you know, I think we'll be right back in the mix there again, and it'll certainly there'll be no stone unturned from our side, management side, our players' side, from what I'm seeing.
It was a busy start of the year for you, almost, you know, dumped in the deep end and nearly in that stage. But the year you weren't to know. Then we thought, well, you're right, around the Tipperary game, we thought things were going to kind of pull on, and it was similar enough actually in from the football point of view as well. Like the footballers were in great momentum as well, and
Yeah,
then
big
boom,
time.
here we go. All
Yeah.
your best made plans and everything just stalled completely. Foot on the handbrake, double handbrake, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Crazy time.
Absolutely, it was, and it happened really fast as well. And that you know, you're always following the media, but we were on such a buzz because the week that actually the lockdown came, the footballers were going into the stadium to play Mayo, and we were going to Wexford, Davy Fitz quarter final. And to be honest with you, the quarter final was the bonus territory. You know, all eyes were on the championship, and we were actually going to get a dry run in Wexford Park. So I think, you know, people are saying, oh, we could have had the hurling football double header. I'd say the management perspective, we're every bit as happy that we were going down to Wexford. But the buzz that evening coming out, that Monday, Tuesday in Loch George, you know, you'd be chatting to Shane that evening. Pádraig Joyce was in with the footballers. There was just a brilliant vibe around the place, and it was really setting it up. And then the Wednesday, we were like, there's something coming here, you know, mightn't be played with a crowd. And little were we to know, I think it was that Thursday, Friday, the crowd ain't the issue here. There's going to be no match, you know. And just a massive adjustment. And, you know, people often say, geez, mad year, whatever. It's my first year. I don't know any different. So in many ways, it's a blessing, if you know what I mean, because nobody has dealt with this before. You know, we're working with the football counterparts, the county board officers, you know, who sit above us or whatever. Nobody's been here before. So there was no right or wrong, or how do you handle it, you know?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like, I know for myself, like I was away covering games at the time, and I came back and to country just being pretty much locked down, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? So it just happened so quickly.
Yeah.
It didn't give any time to react or plan. Not that you could plan for this, but like, you obviously had big plans in place. No doubt you know, your first year in the job, full of energy, optimism, and all your new plans, and then that's just ripped up. That was a crazy time. But then we had, I suppose, if we try and fast forward a bit, because not a lot happened from the outset. I'm sure there was a huge amount of planning, and you're waiting for guidance from Crow Park and whatnot. But we came back into a situation where it looked like we were going to have games back with minimum crowd, and we were happy in that. But that was, again, a huge amount of organisation from your point of view as well.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, I spoke to the lads in Galway Bay, you know, and telling them that, and that's like what I said to you, you can create as much of this as you want, but we would have just planned, which is healthy. But I can tell you the amount of plans that went out the window that will never be seen. We built a 5-week championship, a full knockout if we had to get it done, a 6-week, a 7. We modelled 5 different ones. And then they were all just, again, flittered, gone, whatever. But it was a good exercise in many ways. But I have to say, it has been so busy in terms of, you know, I've chatted to colleagues on the hurling committee who would have been here in other years, and they've said it themselves. You've been thrown with things of national policy that would never have mattered to you. You know what I mean? In that you shift everything, fixtures, the whole lot, crowds, the amount of contingency planning that is going on, venues. We had to move into venues that we could only use that could be some way secured. You know what I mean? Just the amount of small stuff that people really don't care about, to be quite honest with you, that threw itself up has been a lot. Yeah. But I think we got there in the end in terms of the right model as much as we can.
Yeah, because you had it seems like a lifetime ago now, but we had the situation where I think it was 500 people allowed, and then everyone's kind of like, Jesus, I'm not sure about that. And then we kind of had settled on that, and then it was wiped completely, and you almost had the from the official GAA body as well, kind of a fight back from then initially, and nobody knew what was going on. As someone, again, trying to be new in the job, and I don't know how you managed to cope at all, because what you've got in the end is absolutely brilliant product. I think the championship structure is absolutely brilliant, and there's been some wonderful games, and I know we'll touch on the streaming a little bit shortly as well. But as someone who lives away from home, it's an absolute lifeline. I can grab games, particularly games like on a Friday evening, that there's no chance in hell I'd be able to get home in time to get it, even if I was going home for the weekend. Here I can just, you know, put it on the laptop and fire it on the TV or whatever, and we got to see great entertainment. That's been, I suppose, one thing. But that time, how do you like how did you keep things going sane? Because everybody wants information, everybody's
Yeah.
giving out, nobody's happy. It must have been a tough time for you personally, and then you've obviously your day job was up in the air as well. A little family life was ongoing. From
Exactly. Yeah.
your personal point of view.
You're battling all those things, but I think it's a good question in terms of the information. One is the key point that you touch on, and that's the one thing I think I want to bring in always is always constant communication. That is just key. You know, you don't give things time to fester or rumor or people get the wrong idea that we're going to have X amount of people in, what have you. A lot of it was, again, the basic communication. The hardest thing we had, because you know the GAA, I suppose, infrastructure and the people that are involved, like the hurling committee delegates are, you know, almost exclusively male at the moment, which, you know, hopefully we're seeing definitely a lot more female secretaries, etc., which is brilliant to see, and so much healthier in terms of environments for meetings, etc. Exclusively male, and in Galway again, you know, a certain age group. So having to bring meetings online to do that because we couldn't meet, that was difficult, you know. So it was a lot of text, a lot of email. I think the first chance we got around June, we actually brought two groups together, socially distant, in Ballinderry, who accommodated us brilliantly, and we divided up the delegate groups, and that's how we discussed our championship. So we had the power to implement our own structure, if you want. I mean, through CCC, as they call it, more acronyms. But it was very important to me in my first year and to the rest of the hurling committee that we actually went out and said, this is our plans, give us your feedback, give us your input. We want your blessing because it'll come back to bite you down the line, you know. So again, the long story short, constant communication, make a huge effort to get people in on, give their input. We didn't take it all, we took some of it, you know, just people not happy about relegation, things like that.
Yep.
But that's how we handled it, and it was a lot of organizational and administrative work, and just a lot of phone calls, staying in touch with people. That's really the long and short of it. Yeah, but time, I suppose, yeah, it took time.
Yeah, like the relegation one seemed to everybody. I suppose that's a tangible thing to so many clubs as well, and there's the fear factor, but obviously there's the big consequences of it. But no, like, to be fair to, like, I heard you in Galway Bay, and you explained it very clearly and the logic behind it, and it's amazing. That is the key, really, isn't it? Because some people go, "Oh, you're only suiting the senior B teams or whatever," but once you come on board and explain it, everyone's like, "Oh, yeah, that really is." I suppose it doesn't matter if it's championship structure or if it's whatever policy or a new plan, or whatever new plan, that's from chatting for the last couple of minutes, I can see that that's one of your, I suppose, principles, for want of a better word.
Exactly, precisely that, and you're 100% right. You know, if you read that document of our championship proposal, because there's 24 teams, you know, there's 24 teams there at the moment. You can't change that overnight. So you make the best of what you have, and as you said, you just have to go through and say, this is why we're doing it, etc. And as I said, I've been saying it all week. The championship, you know, administrators should never be front and center or whatever. I'm happy to speak. I said that I put myself forward to explain because I think we can do a lot better on that side of things. But you know, the lads that I've been involved with, you know, Damien McGrath, John Fahey, principal officers in the hurling committee that look after, they put a lot of time into it, and we actually said every position will matter. First, you get a 2-week break because you get through to a quarter final. I mean, we saw last week the 4 teams that were 3 weeks in a row lost. You know, that was obviously some factor, but you always have to incentivize every game, and that's why I would be happy with this championship, that it has been a great product. It has gone down very well. The feedback has been from the players, supporters that have been watching it, etc., has been excellent. And you know, you take pride in that, then, that actually when you put a bit of thought into it and explain that relegation was a key part in making that there is a correlation. You know, we can't turn around at the end of every year and say no team gets relegated and next year we'll have a 25 team championship and make a new format. If we're going to raise the standard of Galway hurling in general, you know, if people want to come out of Croke Park next year giving out that we're bet 7 or 8 points after a quarter final or whatever, well, maybe we need to look internally and say, you know what, if we don't set the standard within our own county, we can't expect us to feed up the way as well, you know.
Everybody references, I know it's probably when a team wins, etc., and is multiple winners, everybody thinks their ideas are gospel, but everybody hears about the Kilkenny club scene and how manic it is, and then the clinic training system and stuff like that. Like that's very much the key, because that's even from a neutral just watching it, the fact that there was no real dead rubber games either. Like every weekend there was good games available. That's really is the key competition. We touched on the streaming. It's Jesus. Every sporting body in the country all of a sudden tried to take it on board straight away. We've seen some teams do it very good. We've seen some teams struggle, and then people's frustrations are probably a little bit over the board in terms of it. How did that whole thing come together? Like obviously there's multiple partners out there that you can go with, but to start on that as a blank scratch, that must be a pretty daunting task.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. This is one again. I had these conversations probably with lads like yourself that couldn't get down to semi-final day in Galway, which Galway hurling, for many people know, the semi-final day is bigger than final day. It's the 4 teams in Athenry, which most players prefer playing in rather than Pearse Stadium. Let's call a spade a spade. They do. It's a double header. We get 7,000 or 8,000 people in. It's the day. I remember when playing with Pearse's was, it's not that you want, of course you want to win a county title, and we had good teams in the early 10s. We'll say we got to 2 quarterfinals and we were beaten by a point on each occasion by Gort and Loughrea. And I always remember Sir Donald in the dressing room saying, the place you want to be is at Athenry on county semi-final day. And it sounds like a mad thing to say rather than be in Pearse Stadium on county final day, but that is the dream, and that's where people want to be. And I remember last year getting a load of texts like, Jesus, Teenage aren't doing the semis, I'd love to be there, whatever. And I actually came in and started this year pre-COVID or whatever, and I actually said to whatever, it'd be lovely to look at maybe streaming the latter stages of the Galway Championship. I said, I don't know a whole lot about it. I know they do it up the north. That was the sum total of my knowledge, to be quite honest with you. And I remember we had a management meeting via Microsoft Teams in April when things were pretty bad, and the attitude, I think everyone was, there'll never be any games, but I randomly said something. I think people think I was completely stupid or mad. I was like, we should look at maybe streaming if we get going later in the year, whatever. And I think, to be honest, like a lot of people are on mute, but I think a lot of people laughed at me, to be quite honest. But I suppose one of the people that didn't laugh at me would have been Micheál Healy, who is the IT officer for Galway GAA, and she's also secretary of a Hascrafona. So she's having a great year of it. So Micheál would have been one of those, and Mark Gotch, in fairness, in the office would have been aware of the potential of it. So next thing, when things started coming back, in fairness, we had another management meeting. I raised it again, and I actually said, can we put a subcommittee together to look at it? And there was myself, Micheál, Mark, and a couple more PRO on football side, Seamus Finnerty, Shane Ford from St. James's, and we went to work. That was basically it. And we met 3 or 4 providers, and a lot to be done. And in fairness, again, Michelle's IT officer background, that area, she put together a spec. So we've effectively tendered for it, to be quite honest with you. And I will say this, it's a blessing in disguise that we went with probably the strongest technical offering, if you know what I mean. The commercials or whatever as well obviously play into it, but if you're going at this, as you've seen lately, reliability was a big factor. So we kicked off those conversations, I think, in June. And I think Nematon, who, look, all I can say is we've had a fantastic relationship with them. They've been absolutely brilliant to us in terms of the capacity of games we've done. I think we were in early, which helped. And I think they've had a very positive experience with us as well. So we went with them, and it's been no looking back since, I suppose it's fair to say.
Yeah, because like there's only, I think, a couple of friends were on to me there in Mayo last week, or maybe the weekend before. It went belly up on them, and I know there's problems in Kerry, and there's problems everywhere, because it is, I think people are caught on this is all new territory as well, and you're dealing, sometimes in locations that, the mobile signal mightn't be the best or whatever. There's so many platforms, and then the demand can be twice as much. We didn't realize so many people had an interest in it, and it's all new as well. Everyone's learning on the job, but yeah, you do. Some of those messages and the replies were quite fruity.
They were.
Fruity
and I say this in full awareness. I actually said it to Mark and Micheál. They would have access to Galway GAA platforms whereby they would have to take in the messaging, and I was like, get ready for this, laughing but not laughing, if you know what I mean. I think it's very important. We have 2 big games coming up, whatever, anything could happen. And I think people's expectations have gone through the roof. Like, I know when we started, we were, if we show the games, and some people go, will you do commentary? And look, you know, it's now taken as a given, but back in June, all you wanted was a screen, you know, and to show it. Now, Galway Bay have come on board, you know, and they've been fabulous. You know, you can, you know, they add a lot to it, let's be honest. But people need to understand the reason the streaming is priced at the start €6 is it's a one camera operation. It's not a satellite-based system, as you know. It's dependent on internet or Wi-Fi connection. There's a lot that can go wrong. And look, if something goes wrong, we'll deal with it. If people have to be refunded in the next few weeks because something happens, they'll be refunded. If it falls down on our side or Nematon's side, they're very clear on that as well. But some of the abuse that went towards Mayo, and I know it came out with Kerry and Antrim had some issues as well. You know, it wasn't nice, and I think people's expectations have gone through the roof now, and I don't think there's any way of bringing them back. I mean, my Twitter actually exploded the day of the first round of the day Sarsfield Portumna was on TG4 and Oran Moore and Claren Bridge was on stream afterwards. You know, and I had people actually telling me that it wasn't as good as the TV. You know, and just for people's benefit, there was 18 people from TG4 doing in Athenry to get that picture out. That's the streaming is one person at the moment. You know, that's expectations have to be set and whatever. But I think that's gone out the window now. So I'd be nervous enough. You know, things can go wrong, and if they do, we'll deal with them. If not, we'll not. But so far, Nematon have been brilliant. We had a small glitch early in one of the games. I think the Lee Mellows Gort, they flagged to us that morning that there was problems worldwide with a certain platform, and we were able to get that messaging out that there may be a bad experience, etc. Keep us updated. It actually wasn't too bad. So again, communication probably the key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, look, I've seen even that means league qualifier as well recently as well, go Bellew up and stuff like that. And there's so many variables then as well. Like you're not comparing like to like, and we've got an age now where everybody has an automatic right, it seems, to be able to watch every game that they want. Like, not even that long ago, there wasn't ever a game on TV or whatever. Sky Sports of the Premier League, and then TG Carr, particularly with the club games and stuff like that. And then we were used to having games on the whole time. But as you said, there's a huge difference between a full professional satellite-based operation and the new solution. What you have to say is very well presented, and I have to say as well, from a Galway fan point of view, fair play to you for getting on board so early, because you can notice the difference between the people that got the early bird catches the worm, etc. And it's very much the case here. And if we had situations where games are dropping midway through, it's a whole different situation. But you've got in early, and people, I suppose that you just plead with people like this is the future really. Like, how do you spoke on, you kind of wanted this originally for the end of the year. Is this something that you would like to maybe kind of, suppose, we all seen the growth of social media, and media has gone now to a 360 based platform pretty much, where content is delivered on phones and Google Chromes and stuff like that, as opposed to old school radio and TV, for want of a better word. Is something that you'd like to probably continue in the future, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a great question, because there is a limit to this, and we might touch on something else about the split season if you get a chance after this. But that there's a narrative out there, you know, this is the way forward future. Like, if crowds come back even to 500, right, a certain amount of this at the early stages pulls away. You know what I mean? If you're catering for, at the early stages, for the club itself, there's a limit to the popularity of it, to be very clear. Now, look, if you get a Currafin and a Tune Stars, or a Thurlockmore St. Thomas's early group game, whatever, you definitely go in and put that on. Do you look at like, we have a permanent platform now in Athenry, so we could look at doing something, but we'd have to chat then to Nematon. Is it something that Galway GAA actually incurs the cost for, and you put it out as a service rather than as a income stream? Because to me, while the numbers have been, you know, outstanding, you know, there was over 2,000 people watching the games at the weekend, over 500 or 600 watching the intermediate games, which was very high. The neutral pass for the intermediate games actually shocked me in a good way. But, you know, if a lot of those people can get in, there's a certain level of limit to when you bring on the streaming, I think. And that's been an honest answer. And again, from a subcommittee point of view, I said this is probably something we will have to sit down and look at. But you kind of need your contingency there, Jonathan, that what if crowds fall off again, and next thing you haven't planned to have Nematon there, then you have a massive problem because people's expectations are gone through the roof. So I think there's probably a halfway house of maybe a permanent fixture for some of those matches, Cameron Athenry, Cameron Pearse Stadium. You show them to a certain level for a certain amount of games would be my instinct.
And look, I don't want to get too deep into finances and stuff like that, but how have you, this is obviously, it's hard to compare it because there's a global pandemic going on at the same time, really. But in terms of, I suppose, how have things been impacted where you're going to a situation where as many people as you could physically fit into the ground last year compared to a new kind of audience where I think everybody's watching a good bit more sport and there's more of an interest in the club scene with the county games not going on at the moment, and then every other kind of sport and kind of calendar has been, I suppose, influenced or impacted in a good way as well. How have you kind of, could you, I know it's a wild thing, but as a kind of ballpark figure or kind of the general discussion, how could you, can you compare, are we on par with each other or?
No, I mean, it's incomparable and just to give you a quick context, in the senior and intermediate championships every weekend, let's say the group stages, there's 19 games, right? So you take that. We were only streaming 5 of them. Okay, that's the capacity we had. There's only a certain interest level as well, the height. So you're losing out in 14 gates outside. Like, let's say even your streaming goes well, and we'll compare to your gate. You're talking 14 gates gone. You know, so look, if we get anywhere within 20-25% of a usual year, we'll be doing well. But we are more exposed than most in that the Galway Club Hurling Championship is the premier club championship in terms of attendance and revenue. You know, they're the facts of the matter. You'll see it out there last year.
The gates have been,
you know,
the gates
were, you know, when you add in the season tickets, we break over 1 million. I think Cork was the closest at 660. You know, that's a phenomenal gap. To think Dublin, Limerick, everyone else is 400,000 less than Galway. You know, and the Galway hurling would be on its own, would cap every other county's 2 together. You know, so that was the scale of the impact we've had on our hurling championship. But look, the streaming has been a good lifeline. But it's mainly been more about the services provided. You know, income will be good. It'll be good to have it. But in terms of, we're not even talking comparisons. That's, you know, because we just can't possibly be when you can only show 5 versus 19, etc. But I suppose for the weekend gone past in the quarterfinals, we didn't do too bad relative to what the gate receipts would have been. And I think semi-final we'll actually catch up with ourselves on that side of it, but not the previous rounds are gone. You know.
Yeah, I guess you're almost dividing a line in the grass there, really, with those. It is going to be very exciting as it goes on. Okay, I want to, you touched on it a little bit there. We've seen the situation now, and we hope that we will have, I suppose, a closed doors a championship. It appears like maybe we might have crowds. Who knows? The kind of government kind of little feelers that they put out seem to change every day almost. One day it looks like it's going to be okay, another day it's going to be no, it's closed up. So we'll have to see what comes there. But in terms then of the overall fixture plan, we've had this kind of freak situation where it's happened like this, and the county scene was stopped, and then the club scene come back. And interesting to note as well, I've been chatting to the couple of guys, and even a couple of guys on the county scene, that they all said that, a couple of them that I've been chatting to, they've never enjoyed their hurling as much because it's stripped back some of the nonsense or some of the juggernaut that is the kind of back grind of a we must win and everything. You do this and this. Now it's kind of after the almost childhood. You go out, you don't have the dressing rooms, you go out and you play with your mates and your neighbours, and away you go, and you can come back in and you run home and you shower or whatever. So there's been a novelty. So that's, I suppose, that's kind of reflected, I think, off the pitch, the interest in it. It's been one good thing to come out of this whole thing, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And like, sometimes like they say, you should never waste a good crisis, and we really shouldn't waste this. Like, I love the intercounty setup. I love, you know, I've been involved there this year, just seeing how things are. I can keep my distance from it a little bit in terms of, you know, professionally, because you have to help out, you know, but you know, you go on match day, you're just there to keep an eye. Everyone wants to be involved in it. It's great. It's fantastic. And it takes over. It consumes. There is no point saying it. And it consumes everybody involved in it as well, and doesn't let them out of it either, if you know what I mean. But I've had the same conversations you've had with players, with whatever. I mean, the first thing it's done at the moment is, or could do, is club players need to be taken away from where they have to be seen to choose. They hate doing that. You know, they hate letting down their club or being seen, and they're not letting down their club, they've been put in that situation. So this has been an absolute breath of fresh air to them, and to waste an opportunity to do that into the future would be cruel. You know, it's something I feel very strong with. You can love the club and love the county. It's possible. They can coexist together, and this is the way to do it. I mean, there's so many good examples of why it should. Now, there's also intricacies, like, I mean, the other side, this is people see it and go, oh, it's a no-brainer, whatever. There are issues, you know. Minor intercounty is an issue. Do you do all intercounty together? You can't have minor intercounty during leaving cert. You know, that's a factor. Do you know what I mean? If you front load. But look, there's a ways around that, and there's no point getting into it. But a few things, financially, it would actually condense the season. It would take less pressure off for the whole year, and it would also create a club structure at the end of the year, which I think will become a kind of a micro economy in its own right, that sponsors will get involved. Now, one thing I want to be very clear on, and it's something I'm very passionate about, because I do hear the club game will never replace the county game popularity. You'll have your Friday night games, and there's a certain amount of interest, you know. And I hear this narrative of times that, you know, I kind of got stuck in a Twitter debate lately. I think John Fogarty was on it, and Kieran Cunningham, and a couple of, you know, and they're on about this promotion. Participation is promotion was one of John Fogarty's line, and I couldn't agree with him more. You know, if we pull back the intercounty 4 weeks to July, it still will stand on its own 2 feet. It will outdo what comes up against it in that time. You lose August, but I still, like, kids that are coming along aren't going to be going, I'm not watching the GAA now, it's in July. You know, they don't know the difference, right? So they say you lose that space. Again, what you're actually gaining is the 36-year-olds, 37-year-olds, 38-year-olds will continue to play. The people that have been dropping off now have a set schedule and know they're playing every 2 weeks from August the 21st through until whatever. They will stay playing. Our biggest issue is that the county scene is disrupting the club scene so much that these people are, you know, so sometimes I'm asking, you know, what is this promotion you speak of? What are we actually losing? And I understand they're saying you're losing that space, but the spin-off is there's nothing to lose, in my opinion. And you know what? The worst thing we could do is trial it and see what would happen. You know, do 2 years of it and come back then and say, come back to September then, if that's the right option. It's something, you know, you can hear it in me. I think it would be insane if we don't try and do it. And like the difference it's made, and you look at it, the Manions and Ahas Grafona is the classic example. I mean, they won a relegation final replay against Abbeynock-Moy, who were beaten in an intermediate quarter final last week. That could have been a Haskell this year. You know what I mean? Instead, they're playing senior A hurling next year. And that's because they're two of the best hurlers in Ireland, not two of the best, and they've Sean Blaheen as well. And I talked to Kevin Ward, the guy that's coaching them, and I met him on Sunday, and he just said the reason they got there was because them players were playing with their club. It raised the standard. It takes so much conflict away. It just really has to be looked at.
Yeah, because you're nearly at a stage in a weird way where, from a club, if you're looking just fully from the club point of view, it nearly wasn't in the club's best interests for their players to be picked for the county team or go off for the panel. They were nearly better if they stayed in close. And obviously, there's the promotion of the club, etc. And I suppose you can argue the spins off and sponsorship and more attention, etc. But just strictly from a playing point of view, you're better off to keep everyone together because. And this isn't a dig at. I'm not giving it a dig at managers or players because they were in the situation. It's not their fault. But players were coming back, kind of almost having to do the motions. Their bodies are battered from all the training and the games. They should have been resting, and they just come in and they're expected to lift their game then as well. Like from maybe one training session the week before the game and the build the week up to the game. It just like when people say, "Oh, you can't change it. We need to go back." It's like. It's not as if the current model was working or anything like that.
This is the thing. And just the sponsorship pieces, and that's, in fairness, that's what I suppose the lads, and I was kind of laughing, I didn't throw it in. The biggest losers in all this, no disrespect, would be the media, in that they would, you know, again, I never want to be on this association that I think that club could replace county. It absolutely cannot in the national consciousness. It doesn't. But sponsorship wise, saying you lose a little bit more or whatever, but you will need to spend less money as well, if you know what I mean. If you condense the championship, there's less need for a centrally funded model of Croke Park funding county boards, etc. Whatever. Tighten it up. The club scene I said its own microeconomies around Galway. We have a fantastic sponsor brought on this year in the hurling in Brooks. They've been superb to us. They've committed to us for 3 years, but that's because of the product, and they know that it's one of the most popular club championships in the country. That was pre-COVID, and it's even better since.
You might go back and negotiate that a bit more now, will you?
Yeah, no, but as I said, we're actually doing a promo launch with them tomorrow night. But that will happen. Like, look at, I'll be honest with you. So you say Tyrone club football to me, I'm walking the other way. You know, I've watched 2 or 3 games now in Tyrone based on the Friday night one in TG4, and then the 2 last Saturday evening on whatever. And then you have 2 experts on, you know, Sean Kavanagh on telling you the story about it. Again, there's a limit to that. But I'll tell you one thing, in Tyrone, them clubs, that championship will have no problem getting sponsorship now again. So I think people need to look at the bigger picture. And it's not that a club will become massive nationally, it's that club will become massively locally, even bigger than it is. And that will take care of a lot of funding. And I think that's what we need to get across. And I just really, really hope it happens. And I think that at the moment, I think the chances are that they'll probably give it a rattle, you know.
So what would be, just to be clear from anybody that hasn't heard your views, and it is very much the split style system where you have your club versus county, I suppose county the first 6 months and club the following 6 months. That's the kind of the model that you'd like to see.
I would, you know, you know, there's issues with the Fitzgibbon. How do you fit that in? Do you maybe fit that in the start of the year? Get yourself up and running into March, April for your league. You can pull your league back to 2 groups or whatever. And you know, look, I've seen it in the Examiner as well. They're probably the best model I've seen. Use the league as prep. You know, you don't really need a league final, or if you do, just a league final, no league quarterfinals, and then into your round robin, like we have in the hurling. Get it played by the middle of July, even up into the 20th of July, I would say. You know, so you're only coming back 3 weeks from the hurling final now anyway, which was going to be around the 14th of August this year. And then give a space of 2 or 3 weeks of nothing, I suppose, and then set your fixtures for mid-August and plat it out. Get your county championships done by early October. Get your provincial championships and All Ireland played by early December. You know, that's just it. That would be my. Where do we fit the under-21 club? That's these things that won't bother people on a national scale.
You're thinking already there.
We'll find a place for it. Where do we put the minor intercounty? That's obviously a factor. The other side of it is under-17s don't play club senior, so you could actually run the under-17, the minor, throughout the club season, if you know what I mean. You could just move that. There's solutions, but that, to me, the bigger picture, I would love to see us do 2 years of it, and let's see.
How big of a traditionals are you in terms of the provisional? And I know my personal, I suppose, one thing that I would like to see trial is, I think particularly when you look at from the intercounty football championship, I think it's too drawn out. I think the qualifiers, there's too many of them that are complete dead rubbers. They're bore fest of games with you can kind of see what's going to happen before the draw takes place. The bigger teams are going to kind of stroll their way along, and even some teams, if you're being cynical, almost sometimes will go, "Oh, geez, I'm better off losing this game, and then I can go this way the whole way through." But even without going in too much on that side of it, I would like to see. I think the provisionals, if they are to happen, they should happen at the start of the year, like AKA the league, and then the league structure should be, because it's the best quality in terms of competition, in terms of ranking, and have that as your main kind of March to July or whatever, even April to July. That should be your number one competition then.
For me, it is. And I said, I'm keen, you know, we've seen this for hurling person who grew up with, you know, in an area. I went to school in Castle Blakeney, which is in the parish of Caltra. You know what I mean? Football, it was always huge. Like, to be honest, the crack of beating Mayo is gone now. And that's the only good, you know, that's the only good thing that's left in a provincial, is a Galway Mayo, a Cork Kerry, a Tyrone Donegal. Dublin Meath has even gone away. But even since the qualifier system came in, you know, like Mayo, we beat Mayo 3 or 4 years in a row, and they ended up in finals, and we're just left sitting. There's no tangible. You know, I've been to the last few Mayo games. Like, there's nothing compared to what it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. You know what I mean in terms of. But I tell you, if you met later on in the championship in a non-provincial structure, by geez, would it matter then? So look, we all know the reason that the games are organised through a provincial structure, and I know how these things work, and I know trying to I'll leave you at that. It's going to be.
I can see the grimace on your face
You
already.
know, it's just the challenge. You know, it's again, and I have to be careful with my language. I don't want, you know,
of course,
turkeys and Christmas is kind of
yeah.
the piece. But I mean, if I was sitting on it in the morning, I'd have saying it. I'd be like, you know, put it into the league format that it thrives on. The Division football, one football, Division 2, they're all brilliant. You know, more of that. That's what people want to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there'll be a big, I think, freshness, because we are in danger of, we're in a scenario now, and this is, I suppose, sporting as well, but kind of all platforms. Even look at TV, like look at simple things like Netflix, and you can download stuff and watch something on Prime or whatever. So everything, you know, content is in our faces, left, right, and center. So everybody has more choices, and the more choices you have, the kind of the less kind of structured the old traditional kind of elements are. So we do have to be careful that we do have to stay active. There's so much sport on TV. If you're a neutral sports fan now, you can watch anything from baseball,
Absolutely.
US, you know, everything around, you name it. There's probably no sporting event around the world that you can't watch. So got to stay relevant. You got to move with it. You got to, because it is, while it is intertwined in our DNA, we can't take that for granted. I think a lot of people in charge are sometimes kind of thought, I should look, they're always going to come back to us. You know, it's always this. It's not. You got to move with it. Got to embrace it. You got to make sure that you are relevant.
You got to make it happen. And you know, I've said that not to go on this. You know, and a comment was passed last night. We just a quick meeting. Something, you know, that if we didn't act on the streaming, you know, we can't presume it would have happened. You know, and you've seen that it came in. You've actually spotted yourself without. You saw who the early birds were, because you can see the difference in the quality, and you have to be proactive, as you say. You can't depend that that'll always be there for us, or we'll get away with it, or our shirt will be grand, basically. Mentality.
Classic,
you know, that
yeah.
just, you know, if you fall behind, you know, you're in a bit of bother. But see, again, the other side of that is maybe a split season and change structure. Maybe that will accommodate that might be the driving force that will get us that change, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, let's hope, there's been plenty of talk about it. Let's hope that we do, I suppose, as you said, touching earlier on, don't miss this big opportunity now to act on it. If we speak overall as your role, because something I'm curious around, what is your, obviously I've spoke about high level stuff there, and, you know, dramatic stuff that happened between, a little bit out of the ordinary in terms of manager, you know, leaving unexpectedly to a certain extent, the new manager having to be appointed, and then obviously COVID, the reaction to the streaming, and then the new fixture programs as well. But what's the day-to-day stuff, or what's the, I suppose, your busiest tasks, or your most tasks that you kind of have to implement as your role as hurling committee chairman?
Yeah, I suppose the one at the moment in the middle of it would be is there fixture making, really.
Okay.
It's and again, you touched on a bit, like everyone sees the senior games and whatever, but you know, I think it was the third round of the senior intermediate. We played 64 games between Thursday and Monday, between minor, senior, junior. You know, that's all going on in the background. You know, so the venues, liaising with football, liaising with county committee about the grounds. We're going to Pearse Stadium for the semi-finals. I guarantee you there'll be people giving out about that. You know, if we're at the double header.
Well, you spoke about how good an occasion the semi-finals are. That's right.
Yeah, but there's no with no crowd. You know, with no crowd.
But why?
We can't. And there you go. You know,
yeah,
you
I can preempt the conversations already.
I mean, the other things with mundane stress we have to go in on a Monday night is, as part of CCC, part of the hurling committee, 3 of us are on CCC, is we deal with all disciplinary matters, etc. You know, referees, we review referees, or review how they've been getting on. You know, we have a structure there for appointing them. That's the kind of the stuff day to day. And then again, you know, even before I was chatting to you today, so we're doing a promo with Brooks tomorrow evening, so organising photographers, small pieces like that, you know. And it's amazing the amount of stuff that goes on, and I don't get much of it at all. I mean, if you're John Fahey, the secretary, you should see the stuff that comes in. And I mean, like, move a match an hour, change a referee. Galway is, outside of Cork, it is the biggest county to administrate, and I think we take that for granted at times, you know. My point, again, going back to what I said, is the amount of work that goes on week to week, and again, they don't really, or happened in the past, vocalized what a good job is being done and how difficult it is. And it's always the issue that will rise then, you know, there'll always be something where we'll miss something, all right, and it'll come up and it'll be a controversy, you know. So the main thing is to stop, the main thing of doing is stopping those things happening, I suppose, would be how I put it, you know. Then you'd be liaising with TG4 at times, RT, will we take this game, will we do that game? To be honest, for us, the streaming, it's better to keep it in-house at the moment in terms of financially, whatever. So there's always loads of different angles. And then the intercounty is kicking off again, and that whole scene is, you know, you'll be talking to Shane, working with liaisons, with player reps, just staying on top of everything. There's so much going on that side of things as well, getting everything up, be ready for next week when we go back. So nothing is ever the same, to be honest. No week is ever the same. You know, local journalists would have been on this morning about when the fixtures, etc., access to possible players. There's just 1,000 different things all the time. It's very varied.
Yeah, well, look, I won't delay you much longer because I'm getting tired even listening to that.
Sorry, yeah,
I meant that as a compliment to the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, because it's the age-old thing where you do 9 things right, you get no praise. You do one thing a little bit not right, and everybody jumps up and down on that. It's, I suppose that's very much the way it is.
It's just the one. I was happy, like I have talked to you. You know, my first reaction when you ask or to do this is like, you know, you're kind of a GA person, administrator, whatever. But one thing I am committed to doing, I make no bones about it, is this us and them mentality. That gap has to be bridged. We all come from clubs. You know, I only came in last year. It's not like you turn into some strange beast when you take up one of these roles, you know. And the key thing is communication. As you said, it's all one thing doing radio or giving comment, podcasts, videos. They're the future. They're the way to be engaging with people, getting the message out. And I said, any question, anytime anyone in Galway, I even answer them on Twitter, to be honest. I'm a bit mad at times to do it. If someone feels why is the decision made, just ask and we'll give you the rationale. A classic one last week was I had a load of, how in the name of God did you put Micheál in Ballinasloe? You know, the far side thing. Very simple was, if Micheál wants to be streamed, it had to be in Ballinasloe, and they were more than happy to, you know what I mean? But you see this stuff, Jesus, are they well in there? You know, that type of thing. So there's a reason for everything, just people have to ask.
Perfect. Well, I just have one last question before I go. You still okay to give me those 10 All-Ireland tickets? I think your face dropped there for a second.
I was going to say, probably an easier commitment than 10 county final tickets at the moment.
There you go.
I think that one would be harder than, that's going to cause more trouble on the 27th than it is than All-Ireland final, I reckon.
I suppose touching on that very, very, very quickly then, we're still waiting day by day with what the latest thing, is there any hope that I know, like, for instance, some of the counties are working with allowed have delayed games a week. I think some other counties as well, in hope that they will have a minimum crowd. Are you still kind of waiting to play by ear with that?
We're going to stick to our schedule no matter what. But I mean, for my sake, and look, there was a lot of ranting over the last thing about closing down. You know, I would have been raging with the GAA statement that, you know, they were right in their sentiment, but what, you know, I suppose singling out Ronan Glynn, I was like, what the hell are you doing? You know, there was a way to do that, and you know, I wouldn't agree with Ger now on a lot of things, but you know, he said someone should have gone out and done a few laps of the field and then came back in and thought about it, because I don't think GA did anyone any favors in that regard. So I would be very surprised if we are opening pubs in 2 weeks' time and we can't get up to 200 or 300 people in from the 21st onwards. That's all I can say on it. I think you would lose the people. You know, if you could go into a pub, let 500 people into Pearse Stadium or in Tathenry the week after, or Pearse Stadium the week after, wherever we have the final, that would be my hope. You know.
Yeah, no, in a weird way, it's been a wonderful, I suppose, always in the darkest times, you know, if you're positive, you can make things happen. And it's been thanks to you and so many others involved, it's been a wonderful championship so far. It would be nice if we did have a big final with even just 500 people or
exactly
400 plus.
Can you imagine? Could you imagine winning? Like, let's say Thomas's don't win it. Can you imagine Capatagal, you know, Loughrea or Turlockmore? You know, look, it doesn't taint. Don't get me wrong, but you're lifting a cup there, and none of your family or your friends are there to see that happen. And you know that, even if you have 50, it'd make a difference, you know, because they're loud when they're in there. Believe me, I couldn't believe how much noise in the first 2 rounds 50 people from each team were making. But yeah, it'd be nice just to even get to that.
And you definitely have to turn the phone off that week if
Absolutely.
take a request. Listen, Paul, thank you so much for being so open with your time. Then it's a pleasure. I'm sure we can hopefully touch back again when we have more positive things to be talking around about. But very informative. I've even learned a lot about structures and stuff going around. So
Yeah,
I hope everybody has enjoyed it. You can get Paul online on Twitter. That's where you put all taken requests, all abuse, all questions,
Jesus.
and everything like that. I'm just kidding, Paul. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks so
we'll
much,
talk to you
Jonathan.
soon. Thank you.
You too. Cheers.